It was nearing dusk when the bus finally dropped Sarah off at the edge of Pine Hollow, a small town she'd never heard of until she received the letter. It was an invitation to claim a distant inheritance, a sprawling old manor that had been in her family for generations, untouched and forgotten. The letter came from an unknown relative who had vanished years ago. The air was heavy with moisture, and the sky, a deepening shade of grey, seemed to warn her to stay away. But curiosity, mixed with the hope of escaping her mundane life, pushed Sarah forward. She began the long walk to the estate, following a narrow path, flanked by trees so tall and dense they blocked out the fading sunlight. As she approached the manor, the sense of wrongness settled over her like a thick blanket. The house was enormous but decrepit, its windows broken, its once grand doors hanging off their hinges. The wind howled through the gaps, mimicking a mournful wail that sent shivers down her spine. Yet Sarah couldn't shake the strange pull the house had on her. Inside, the air was colder. Every step echoed ominously, and the shadows seemed to twist and crawl along the walls. She wandered through the labyrinthine halls, feeling like she was being watched. The house felt alive, and not in a welcoming way. That's when she found it. The letter had mentioned something about a family heirloom hidden in the basement, but when she pried open the heavy wooden door to the lower level, an overwhelming stench hit her, rotting wood and something else, something far worse. The basement was dark, lit only by the flickering flame of her matchstick. The walls were lined with shelves of ancient, forgotten things, rusty tools, old books with pages torn out, and what looked like jars of strange, preserved creatures. But in the center of the room was an old chest covered in dust and chains. As she knelt to open it, Sarah felt a chill in the air, as though someone or something was right behind her. She spun around, heart pounding, but saw nothing except the dancing shadows on the walls. With trembling hands, she unlocked the chest. Inside, she found a small, ornate mirror. Its glass was so polished it seemed to glow, but as she looked closer, Sarah's reflection wasn't quite right. It didn't move when she did. In fact, it was smiling, a slow, widening grin that wasn't hers. A whisper echoed through the basement, a voice so soft and sinister it seemed to crawl into her ears. "We've been waiting." Suddenly the mirror cracked and her reflection began to warp and shift. The face in the glass was no longer hers, but something far darker, eyes black as the void and teeth too sharp for any human. Panicking, Sarah dropped the mirror and it shattered on the floor. But the whispering continued, louder now, and she realized it wasn't coming from the mirror anymore. It was coming from the walls. The house groaned and shuddered, and the shadows took shape, rising from the corners like living things, twisted and grotesque. She ran for the stairs, but the door slammed shut with a deafening bang. The basement began to warp, the walls bending inward as if the house was closing in on her, swallowing her whole. The voices grew louder, chaotic now, as ghostly hands reached out from the shadows, grasping, pulling at her, dragging her back toward the shattered mirror. Just as her vision blurred with panic, she caught one last glimpse of her reflection, her real reflection this time. Her face was pale, eyes wide with terror, but behind her in the glass stood a figure, tall, gaunt, with black eyes and a smile that didn't belong to this world. The last thing Sarah heard before the darkness consumed her was that voice again, low and mocking. "Welcome home."